Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? It's another interesting week, and like I said before we got on, I'm trying hard not to include Trump topics, but another week goes by and it gets raised another level. We've got a couple of things we'll talk about today, but we'll start there. It's just it is a TV show. I mean, I think we said that last week, and then the next crazy thing happens and it escalates the cliffhanger or something. But I mean, just as a starting point, what was interesting about this week's turn of events is that, I mean, we'll have to see how it plays out, but it was like the first time that the special counsel over there really did a move. He's put something on the record that is quite potentially damning to Donald Trump. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's a smoking gun still. It's looking really bad, obviously. But what I maybe just as a starting point, we were talking last week about the fact that there was a acting attorney general put in that's many of the kind of said that he's a stooge for Trump. He obviously didn't stop this from getting out there, and the question is the special counsel tactic here to try and get as much onto the public record as possible before maybe he's sort of stymied from doing anything further, because now with something like this out there, like it's harder for, I mean, Trump's very good at obfuscating and turning everything around, but the fact is it's out there now. It's not something that's conjecture, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's out there, you're right. But remember, at the same time, there's a lot of other stuff out there, and a lot of it is fake. It's getting harder and harder now to actually find out what the truth is. So I think both sides are playing basically a chess game here, where you've got the special counsel trying to get stuff on the record to build a bit of a beachhead. And by the same token, the Trump camp knows they can take a certain number of hits and, they don't get bruised. So they're going to let some of this out, I think, and then either create a distraction or just wait for a technical weakness, and then they'll weigh in as well. Yeah. And then we'll see it'll have to go to another level again.
Exactly. One thing that I just wanted to draw out here is that what was essentially sort of put out there is that there was a scenario where Trump's people were ostensibly liaising with the Kremlin itself in order to try and get this Trump Tower project up and running in Moscow, and this was happening well into the campaign for the presidency in 2016. So the guy that pled guilty this week, Michael Cohen, basically said that he was lying when he said that it had finished. All the talks of this project had finished earlier than what it did. Now, set aside the legal argument, I think what is causing so much angst is that in the past, anyone who had done this, who had been running for president or for any office really, would have been done for basically the optics and the ethics of it, as opposed to it being illegal. Now, obviously, that doesn't matter with Trump because he doesn't care, and he'll just let it roll off him. But whether it plays out as being illegal is one thing, and it may very well still go down that path, but Isn't that...
There are all sorts of legal and business defences that he will have rolled into this. So every Trump initiative is a separate concern. It could have been handled by one of his family members or one of his staff, and he can just say he had no knowledge of it.
But isn't that the bigger issue almost, that this is like supposed to be a quintessential component of American democracy, that they're all transparent, they're all trying to do everything ethically and above the book for the public good, but this is sort of against that because we know that if you look into probably any big business in the US, or probably anywhere else in the world for that matter, their take on what's right or good proprietary, it can be sometimes very different to what the regulations state. I mean, we only have to look at what's happened in Australia with the banking system Royal Commission.
if you lift the lid on anything, I think you're going to find dirt.
But I guess there's that's one thing, and another thing that I've seen discussed. I saw a video where if Trump hadn't won, what parallel universe would have happened there? That essentially that all of this would have just stayed in the. No one would know about it because it would never come out. It would just be because no one would have any interest in it, and the only reason it's coming to light is because he's in public office. And the expectation is that there's a certain level of standard, I guess, that because there's that conflict of interest thing where it's essentially how can he be going off doing this, trying to get a business deal with an adversarial government while still being able to discharge the duties of the office kind of thing. And it seems like they're struggling with that at the moment. And obviously with someone like Trump there who doesn't care and he's just going to go out, yeah, of course, no problems. He'll say he'll pivot from, never did anything like that, don't have any connections. And then when it comes out that he did it, yeah, of course I did. And even if, it wasn't the case, it'd be perfectly fine for me to do this. So when you've got someone like that in there, how can you argue against it, really?
Well, that's right. And you do wonder, though, to me, Trump looks reasonably safe, or as safe as he can look. I don't know. He's always looked like he could topple at any moment, but he's still there. And you wonder how much this is driven, perhaps as sort of payback, and I don't think by the Clintons, but the people that, took offence to the way the Clintons were pursued are now, getting one back on a guy they don't like, and they're pursuing him now in the same sort of way. And, it goes to show that at the top levels of politics, although Trump isn't really accused of any political corruption, I don't think. Well, maybe slightly, but,
yeah,
it's more business dealings, I think, that they're looking for that are improper and may have a relation to the political position he now holds, whereas the Clintons, running a large political organisation effectively, and, you lift the lid on them if you want to go after them, and you can find something to put into the media. And that's really what we're seeing when we talk about this being like a reality TV show, is because, both camps are putting these stories into the media. They're not actually testing them properly in a court of law.
Yeah.
No one's actually really taking action. They're actually just taking pot shots at each other in the media, and then all it takes is someone to misstep or misspeak, and then it's all on in the courts. So we'll wait and see what happens.
I guess as before we move on to our next topic, I think the final thing to kind of say here is that it's quite obvious that Trump never intended to win, that he was using the whole thing as a excuse to basically get as much publicity as possible, which is kind of like a way to, basically generate as much money and light on his businesses, so that when he got out, he could probably, parlay all of that to improve his business empire. And winning was unexpected, and not that he hasn't since continued down that path. It's just that
everything that's happened since has been unexpected. So he's certainly delivered.
But if I just wonder if he did intend to win, would he have been a bit smarter maybe about how he went about half of this stuff, so that it wouldn't come back to bite him so quickly, I guess, after the fact?
I don't know. I don't think he could have ever changed anything he'd done in the past. I think he's covered his tracks well, otherwise he'd already been gone. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that's one of those things that it's interesting to think about, the parallel universe.
All right, sticking with politics, but now closer to home, and kind of a parallel maybe with America and the issues that are happening with political parties and how they're getting split down the middle with various different factions and whatnot. But we had a state election in Victoria recently where the Liberal Party, who, for those in the States who are watching, would be the equivalent of the Republican Party maybe, in terms of ideology. They're having a bit of a tough time at the moment because they got walloped in this state election, and there was kind of an implication that this would be replicated federally, and it's all coming down to a lack of what is it that they're on about, and that fact that they seem to be splintering with factions trying to sort of fight against each other, and that's why you had leadership turmoil It's for those overseas, it's a bit embarrassing to imagine that we seem to be very Italian-esque in our change in leaders. I just find it all kind of fascinating that we're going through this as well. It's like there are sort of there's global implications for this sort of thing, but seeing it play out locally is interesting as well. That you wonder what is it that's causing all of this, and it's like the rise of the niche market or niche audience is having detrimental impacts on our at the highest levels of leadership. Because of the way support seems to work these days and the way, the bases work, for these political parties.
Oh, look, I think is effectively that what we're seeing now is a generational shift. And they say every 60 years you get a big generational shift. That's, about 3 generations. The internet's obviously having an impact, a big impact in that, but people's attitudes now are completely different. So 60 years ago, people were worried about the environment or started being worried about the environment. 60 years ago, people wanted more inclusion, social inclusion and diversity. And now you've got 3 generations of that thinking. Unfortunately for conservatives, by definition, they're still living 60 years ago. And it's very difficult. They have to change. They have to change their values because in the Australian context, we have there's probably the last part of the egalitarian Australian society that we'll see before it shifts to something else. And so that's what Australians want by and large, whatever their socio-economic status.
And the fact that it does take time, like you said, it doesn't just happen instantly. It's just a build-up of events, and eventually someone ends up on the wrong end of the stick politically for that. Well, I found it interesting too that the
conservative. I mean,
yeah,
I don't want to beat the Conservatives up as well because everyone else is, but by definition, Conservatives want to keep things the same way that they are or were, and you can do that for 40 years. You can't do it across 3 generations because I guarantee you the grandchildren will be completely different to the grandparents.
The other thing that I thought it was interesting in this state election is that there's been much ado made about the Greens doing so well in Victoria and particularly in Melbourne and inner Melbourne, and it seems like they didn't do as well as expected. And while there was a lot of ancillary issues attached to that, I don't know, is their presence as a third party a little shaky at the moment? I mean, they're still there and there's still a presence, obviously, but the history of third parties in Australia has always been interesting, and they don't necessarily hang around forever.
Well, that's right. I mean, you compare them to where the Democrats have been and vanished. So that's I think something that I'd be concerned about if I was a Green. But almost in the same way as the Conservatives look backwards, the Greens had a very strong vision in that early time, but now they need to be something else after 60 years. The Greens have been around 60 years, believe it or not, maybe not as successful as they've been in the last 10 or 12 years, but they've been around. And that thinking now is commonplace. There's nothing special about, just being Green because, let's face it, most parties, except for the Conservatives, are very Green in their outlook. And so, the Greens are finding themselves marginalised by their own philosophy, effectively. They need to find something extra, and they really don't have a lot in the way of concrete operational policies. And so really that's where they get exposed now. They're not going to build, a brand new motorway. They're not going to build a brand new airport. They're not going to build more infrastructure, or at least I've never heard them say they will.
Okay, complete change of tack now, and we haven't done a science topic for a while with in between all that Trump news that we seem to keep on getting through. But there was quite a significant event that happened just recently with the supernova that scientists managed to catch. But what was interesting was the white dwarf that was sucking on the other star, and it just created a spectacularly visual sort of event. And the other thing that I always love about this sort of thing is that it happened 170 million light years away, which means it happened 170 million years ago, and we're only just seeing it now. And it's that sort of thing that kind of blows my mind, or blows anyone's mind, when you think about this sort of stuff.
Oh, that's right. And you just wish you could be a little bit closer to see it, don't you?
Yeah.
Probably not if it's your own star, but gee, wouldn't it be good to be sitting somewhere in a spaceship watching it? You'd be able to sell seats.
Yeah. That's interesting. You can't, because of the distances and the fact that you're really seeing things that have happened so long ago, even if you were closer to it, how could you even, you'd have to, how would you figure out where that would happen, or how to predict it? Or it'd be a fairly tricky exercise trying to get that done, assuming you could even get past the fact that how do you travel there and all that sort of thing.
Well, if you could get past there, if you could be everywhere all at once, it's happening all the time.
Yeah,
literally. But because that's the size of the universe, but it's not happening all at once. No, we're so far away that it just, or the universe is just so incredibly big from our perspective, it's not happening all at once. It's amazing and it's mind-boggling. But this sort of occurrence is rare to see, and so we're very lucky to have been able to see it and know that this is actually what happens. That a small old star can attach itself gravitationally to a much larger star and then just suck the life out of it until it has too much and just explodes.
Yeah.
Spectacular.
Exactly. All right, and we'll change tack completely again, and this is more of an amusing one. Well, I'm sure Microsoft's happy about it, that they were briefly more valuable than Apple again. The share price going up a bit, and the market cap beating Apple. I know this is all just, minutia really, and it sort of gives Microsoft, bragging rights for 5 minutes. I don't know if it necessarily means anything other than the conception that Microsoft was having trouble, maybe still staying relevant. I think they're still doing pretty well, and I think it's almost a validation of their strategy that they've been able to pivot to something else that isn't Windows to be able to still have that big business component to their their persona, I guess.
Yeah, well, I just think it's amazing. Like, okay, I know like someone came up with a headline that Microsoft is ahead of Apple again, but really it's very telling that nobody cares, even when they see that headline, which goes to show you that a lot of the story about Apple being up or down is just hype, and it is worth a big shout out to Microsoft there for doing a great job over 10 years of reinventing itself without beating its own drum. If you look at the way IBM, say, has gone over the same period of time, you might not find that actually they're doing as well as they'd like us to believe.
Well, not to mention the fact of other big companies that have gone completely out of business because they haven't had the foresight to change what they've been doing, and that takes courage to do that, because the amount of inertia that is in a big company like that to stick with the tried and true course is hard to overwhelm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at IBM. They did what would have been seen almost as visionary, but a hard choice of pulling out of hardware and just moving into software. And then they found that really all they had was the ability to, really pursue artificial intelligence. We'll still see in the future whether or not that's successful. But they pulled out of hardware at a time when actually if they had just gone ahead and made tablets really well, or marketed their tablets really well is probably more the key, they might now also have a significant segment of the market still.
Yeah, exactly.
They left at the top of the PC era and never looked beyond post-PC, or never looked to post-PC.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there, and we'll check in again on a whole bunch of topics. And like I said, I'll try not to bring up Trump again next week, but, a week's a long time in Trump land, and it may just happen again. I can't promise anything, guys.
Very good. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks, but I'm sure around Christmas they won't want us to get bored. I'm sure there's going to be more.
Absolutely. All right, so don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. We've got YouTube and Vimeo channels where you can watch us, RSS feeds, so you can subscribe and listen to us on any of your devices that you've got. And we hope you enjoy the website and the content and your time there. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.